outset, I wish to thank you, Professor Mani, for inviting me to chair this BMA Global Conclave on Ethics. Greatly appreciate you reaching out to me, Professor Mani. It gives me a great opportunity to reach out to my international network and reconnect with them. I'll request you to please start the proceedings of this global BMA Global Conclave on Ethics.
Namaskar, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Mahendra Chavan. It is our honor that you readily agreed to be the chairperson of this Global Ethics Conclave. We started planning this, you will recall, about 3 months ago. And today, we see a wonderful collection of minds present in this room, not only from India, but across the globe. We deeply appreciate your efforts in making this a wonderful learning experience for all of us. We have a record number of 269 registrations, but as it often happens, people tend to amble over a period of time. And we have always believed not to punish people who are punctual. So here we begin with this Global Ethics Conclave. Let me, on behalf of all my colleagues in the Bombay Management Association, starting from the past presidents, which include dignitaries like you, Mr. Mahendra Chavan, Shri Shailesh Hari Bhakti, Shri Indrapal Singh Ji, Shri Ernest Fernandez, who are already here with us. My colleagues on the executive committee welcome each one of you to this Global Ethics Conclave. A very special welcome to our friends and guests from all over the world, right from Geneva to begin. Professor Christophe, namaste and welcome to India. It's a delight that you are here this evening along with us. I'm going to take only 2 minutes to reconfirm that perhaps Mr. Mahendra Chavan is the right person to lead this conclave for us. Himself, a past president of the Bombay Management Association at the millennium year, as we may say, 1999-2000. He is the chairman of Mahindra and Young Foundation, and we believe in India and internationally. He is one of those people who is most respected voice in the field of sustainability, governance, and leadership. He is the vice chairperson at the Asian Center for Corporate Governance for the Global Advisory Board. He is also the chairman of Fino Payment Bank, which is a new gen digital bank. He's been part of several such advisory boards across the world, right from UK, Netherlands, and of course, very active also in the Indian Merchants Chamber and the Bombay Management Association. On behalf of BMA, I welcome each one of you to this learning journey today in the form of the BMA Global Ethics Conclave. And I request Sri Mahendra Chavan to please take the proceedings further in his own immaculate, efficient style. Over to you, Mahendra Bhai. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Professor Mani, for your kind words. You've been extra generous, I must say. So, as a past president of Bombay Management Association, I have always had affinity to this. So, when you approached me, of course, I didn't bat an eyelid to accept this. Let me add my word of hearty welcome to all of you to this global conclave on ethics. Particularly special welcome to our international speakers, Dr. Christophe Stickelberger, founder and president of Global Ethics Net, Ms. Oya Ozarslan from Transparency International, Global Board member, and also chairperson of the Ethics Committee of Transparency International, Judge Marvin King, who will soon join us, the former judge of Supreme Court of South Africa, and a patron member of the Marvin King Academy for Sustainable Development in Asia, the academy which is supporting this conclave. And of course, above all, I feel privileged that he has been my mentor for more than 20 years. Other leaders from Indian corporate world, Mr. K. Mistry, Vice Chairman and CEO of one of India's largest financial services sector and mortgage company, HDFC Limited. Mr. Mukundan, Managing Director of Tata Chemicals. We have a spiritual guru. Most welcome to Swamiji, Swami Prakashananda from Chinmaya Mission, New Delhi, and two legal luminaries, Justice B.N. Sri Krishna and Judge Marvin King. And of course, my dear friend, our own Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, the former president of Bombay Management Association, chairman of L&T Finance, and independent director on several boards of corporate India. Welcome to you all, and thank you for taking time out for this worthy cause. I must compliment Professor Mani, president of BMA, that BMA Conclave on Ethics has shaped in a truly global event with speakers and participants from 4 continents and 14 countries. Ethics form the foundation of principles based on which long-lasting businesses are built. Business ethics is a moral compass which guides the conduct of the business. It is a system of moral and ethical beliefs that guides the values, behaviors, and decisions of a business organization and the individuals within that organization. It's only common sense and not rocket science to know that purpose-driven organizations command greater respect from all stakeholders, including regulators and society at large, and they last long. There's enough empirical evidence around the world which proves that companies which have survived beyond 100 years are the ones which had a strong culture and ethics, and this ethics is deeply embedded in their DNA. However, it is unfortunate that in the last 2 decades, there have been a significant erosion in these ethics and value systems in governing the countries by politicians, I'm sorry to say that, as well as governing and managing the companies by corporate leaders. I won't go there. There are several scams around us, starting from Enron in 2001, Lehman Brothers 2008, 2G spectrum scam in India, Satyam, the famous Colgate, and not to forget the financial frauds, and the trade-based and other economic crimes in Asia. The root cause, what is it? The root cause for all this extreme greed and deep erosion in business ethics and value system. So greed and fear, these are the 2 emotions which create a lot of problems. Therefore, it's only appropriate that BMA, along with its partner organizations, decided to organize Global Conclave on Ethics, which will reinforce the practice of ethics in business decision making and sensitize business leaders and managers. I want to particularly thank Christophe for bringing in Globe Ethics Net to support this organization, Justice Sri Krishna and Shailesh Haribhakti as advisors to Marvin King Academy to support this event. So let me very quickly come to what's happening around businesses, in terms of managing and establishing ethics and culture. Many organizations have established ethics and compliance programs as a way of minimizing the risk of ethical misconduct or wrongdoings among employees. These programs typically consist of policies, processes, and education and training initiatives that explain a company's business ethics. They clarify how these ethics should translate into operating procedures and workplace behavior. I would like to share 6 factors contributing to the success of an ethics and compliance program, which came out of the result of the research conducted by Pennsylvania State University and University of Delaware, covering a couple of thousand employees from 6 large American companies. And what are these 6 ingredients? Leadership, consistency between words and action, fairness, openness, just rewards, and value driven. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will have the privilege of hearing many international practitioners and India's top management experts sharing with us their perspectives on ethics. The Global Conclave will cover business ethics, personal ethics, and judicial ethics. Dr. Christophe, founder and president of Global Ethics Net, Mr. K.K. Mistry, Ms. Poya Ozarslan, and R. Mukundan will talk about the business ethics. Swami Prakashananda from Chinmay Mission, a spiritual guru, will open newer paths for us as to how we can really work on our personal ethics. And the 2 legal luminaries will discuss and debate the important issue of judicial ethics. Judge Marvin King, the former judge of Supreme Court, and Justice B.N. Sri Krishna. Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti and I will be moderating the fireside chat. So this, ladies and gentlemen, will be the wholesome treat that BMA Global Conclave has in store for us. With this, I would like to invite our keynote address and quickly introduce him, Dr. Christophe Stickelberger, founder and president of Global Ethics Net. Welcome, Christophe, once again. He's also the executive director of Global Ethics Net since 2008. He's executive director, Geneva Agap Foundation, popularly known as GAF. He's been professor of ethics and taught ethics in several countries like Russia, Nigeria, China, etc. He's PhD, doctorate in peace ethics and habilitation in environmental ethics. Over to you, Christophe.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Sri Mahendra Chauhan, my colleague. It's a great honor to be with you here and to share among these distinguished speakers and participants some thoughts about global perspectives on business ethics, and with a special focus on what I call the triple H, heart, head, and hand concept. How can we promote, live, implement business ethics in this with this triple H? My background, as you heard, is on ethics, applied ethics in several aspects, which belong together. Business, political ethics, environmental ethics cannot be separated. They are somehow interconnected, as we all know. I had the privilege to be in India. I estimated, I think, maybe 60 times in the last 40 years. Since 79 when I came the first time. And I was always impressed by this combination of business mindset, innovation, but also this deeply rooted culture of values based on religious values, but also based on your whole culture. And without flattering you in India, I think it's really one of the contributions that comes from India, that this holistic view, and I will say more about that in my presentation. I had the privilege to be in universities and with business around the country, from Jaipur to Nagarcoil, from Shillong to the east, in the east to Mumbai, Bombay. So, and I have seen this culture, which of course, as you presented already, is under threat. And one reason may be really this fast growing globalization, where it opens a lot of abuse, even though I guess all of us are in favor of globalization, but how to have now values on a global scale, whereas in the past we had it more on a smaller scale. Let me come, yeah, and I'm happy that Global Ethics Net is a partner of this important event, because we try in globalethics.net to give an input, especially on ethics in higher education, because from future leaders come, many of them come through the university systems, including future business leaders. Now, let me start with let me present 5 points. The first is very briefly the situation of COVID. I think COVID now as a global pandemic showed once more the interdependency of all sectors of society, public, private, company, state, families, and we know how we need to cooperate across sectors. The second observation in this COVID is the solidarity which is needed, because if you are not living in solidarity, we are affected by the negative effects of greed and individual, let's say, individualism. So but at the same time, we see the need for balance between cooperation and competition. We are still in a market economy, we are still competitors, but now how to balance this call for solidarity and cooperation, which is vital. It's not just a wishful thinking, it's vital in this pandemic, but how to combine it. For example, now already 14 companies producing vaccines, but to have a fair distribution of the vaccine. So these are key ethical questions. Also, a key challenge now with COVID is, of course, the debt explosion. I must tell you that to my children, I tell them sometimes we now put a heavy burden on our next generation, our children, how to settle this debt explosion in the next 30 to 50 years. We also, and that's my second point, the situation of business ethics on a global level. We have many legislations, rules, regulations, as it was already mentioned, and that is very positive and needed. I think we can observe the last 20 years that business ethics became from a niche topic to a mainstream topic. I take the latest regulations in the EU, European Union, on ESG, which now makes it compulsory to do some value-driven behavior to implement by European legislation. And that's not the only one. We see that movement on mainstreaming business ethics on many places. We see the ISO standards, the UN norms, but at the same time, no, and we can also say this integrated reporting initiative of Mervyn King and Mahendra Chauhan and myself have been part of it since the beginning, with a promotion of integrated thinking. I think that's another move which was clear in the last 20 years. We need not these boxes. We have an environment report and we have a financial report and we have a social report, and they have nothing to do with each other, but to integrate them to a holistic view of business in society. At the same time, due to internet, due to COVID, due to lockdowns, cyber criminality and business criminality as such increased a lot. So that is a big challenge now, how to face that. And I would say this is one of the calls I would have. We in the business sector, together with politicians, regulators, judges, we need to strengthen the instruments. We need to stand together because the threat, and I attended several cybercrime conferences in Delhi, 4 of them, annual conference with Dr. Pavan Dugal, and we have seen and know that 95% or even more, according to experts of cybercrime, is not catched. So we need to strengthen that. It's a moral obligation. And that leads me to my third point. What are then the values that we want to defend and to promote? The values in our behavior. I developed, and that's nothing revolutionary, but to repeat, we have common values across cultures, across religions, across nations. And I think that's important because there are still many people who think, yeah, no, we are the best, we are the only one, we are number one, and our value system, we have to put it on the others. But I think world peace and cooperation and trade and economic progress is only possible if we respect each other in our respective value systems, and to discover and confirm that as human beings, we have common values because we are human beings. And then, of course, we have all the differences in Hindu, in Christian, in Islamic value systems, but the basic of respect, of freedom, of justice, fair distribution, of peace, of participation, and others are common as human beings, because we all want to live a life in dignity and respect and a decent life. Now, one of the big challenges, I think, is that we have how to balance these values. And I used the COVID lockdown last year to publish a book of 600 pages on Glow Balance, Ethics Handbook for a balanced world post-COVID. You can download it for free if you go to globeethics.net, globeethics.net/glowbalance. You can download the book for free or you can buy it. But the core idea is that we need to balance opposite values. Because, for example, freedom is a value which, of course, is very important. Freedom in business, in decisions, and so on. But freedom in the extreme does not guarantee an equal and fair distribution. So how to balance fairness and freedom, just as one example. Now, and this leads me now to my third point of the 5. The third point is about what are then the instruments in global business ethics to strengthen these values. Personally, I was, since my study times in the 70s, convinced that we need structures, we need legislation, we need ethics codes, we need rules in the company and in the society, as we need rules in the family for a decent living together in a community. So, we are all somehow weak persons. You are all strong, as I know, but myself, at least, I can say, you know, we want to do the good, but we do the bad. So that's human nature. We are not able to be the saints and the gurus and to do all what we want to do. That's why we need then threats by punishment, by court decisions, that helps us to behave in an ethical way. So this institutional setting is very important. We should not overload the individual and say, yeah, you should do this, you should do this, and you should do this, and then we crack down because we're not able to do. So that's why, for me, institutions, laws, settings, rules are helpers, including taxes, incentives, help a business to be more sustainable if they can deduct some investments in sustainability from their tax. That's a business instrument to behave more sustainable. So all these decisions, I think, these levels of rules and regulations and incentives are key. But at the same time, during the last couple of years, I came more and more to the conclusion that still the institutionalized ethics is not enough. We need also the personal character education. We need to develop our personalities in a way which strengthens our decisions. Because the criminals, we can observe, they can always escape. They are always a step ahead of laws and regulations. So it's not enough to run behind the criminals and the non-ethical persons in order to strengthen behavior. And that leads me to my fourth and key point, that is what I call the triple H, heart, head, and hand. I think on an individual level, we need to strengthen this integrity of the triple H. The heart. The heart is an expression of our emotion, or we could say embedded values at the center of our personality and company. It has to come from the within. If it's an outside, we have to follow the new legislation of India or of Switzerland or of some rules of the UN, that's not enough. We need to embed it in our inner conviction. And I would go even a step further. What is the expression of the heart? It's the emotion. And often we think, yeah, no, I don't want to mix emotion and my rational thinking. And I plea for integrating the emotion. I ask a very simple question to all of us. When did you cry the last time? When did you have tears? Or where was a CEO who addressed the shareholders or who addressed the employees and had tears in the eyes? Maybe that's a strange question, but the tears are the expression of our heart, of what is very dear to us, what is in our inner value system. And that's why I published also on that, tears are not negative, tears are a blessing, an expression of this kind of, the heart is speaking, and the heart is giving the motivation. When we have tears, when we see the slums of Mumbai or a person in the slums of Mumbai, and we look at the ears, at the eyes of a person, and we have tears, that's then motivating us. We want to do something to overcome poverty. The head, innovate critically in transforming needs to solutions. Of course, if you have only emotions, that's not working. We as business people, as politicians, as judges, we all know that we need rational thinking. We need a deep analysis, and that is needed. A heart without head is dangerous because it can deviate easily. So we need the best analytical brains in a company. But what is best? Best is what is holistic, where you have an analysis of the economic factors, the political factors, values factors, sustainability factors. And the best is when this analysis is as independent as possible. If we have analysts in our company who just want to say what the CEO wants to hear, then it's not helpful. So we need a culture in business, as in politics, as in education, a culture of critical thinking. That means a culture where the CEO enables and encourages, please come up with ideas, even if I don't agree as your superior, but come up, and then of course I may accept or I may refuse, but do not filter in advance, because then intellectual honesty is missing and innovation is missing. The third is the hand. So heart, head, and hand. Heart and head is not enough. It is stuck in analysis and motivation, but then we need, of course, the hand. That means impact the world with sustainable and scalable solutions. And I add the word scalable because I'm really impressed. I think that's a specific skill of entrepreneurs and of business. They have to think how to scale up a solution. They cannot be happy if they have a solution, but it's just for 10 people. So the politicians are not so much driven by scaling up solutions, but business is for good, of course, economic reasons. So I think if the business sector can contribute this capacity of scaling up solutions on a global or a regional or even a local scale, but because we need not only quality, we need also quantity now to solve the solutions. It's not enough to have a solar cell of my roof on my roof in Switzerland, which we have since 20 years, but we need to scale up the solar industry. And I've seen the solar villages in India as very good examples. So scaling up as an expression of the hand, but also, of course, the sustainability orientation. We need technological solutions, and that's one wish I have for the businesses. Also, this holistic thinking means we need education, technology, and the different things. We cannot say technology is enough. And let me close now with a last point very briefly, integrity. We have serious dilemmas, and I think all of us have experienced it, where we want to do something good, but then there is a high risk. A risk to lose the job, a risk to lose a business. For example, we want to get a contract, and it's obvious that we cannot get the contract without bribes. So what to do? If we refuse the bribe and we do not get the contract, we may have to dismiss employees. So that's a real dilemma. It's not easy to say, yeah, of course, we all are against corruption. It's a real dilemma. And that is where then the test comes, that we have to stick to our integrity and say integrity first, even in case I have to lose my job or I lose some business, but in long term, it is paying back. And my reputation and the reputation of my company is the higher good and higher value. And as Sri Chowan Mahendra said at the beginning, companies who survive 100 years have learned this lesson. They can only survive with integrity in the core. So that means, to sum up, the triple H, head, heart, and hand, leads then to a holistic, that's the fourth H, so to say, holistic view. Integrated thinking is the fruit of it. And integrity in the character of especially the leaders, but all the participants in a company or in an institution, which needs a strong character, courage, also the willingness to be lonely, as we know. We are not applauded with integrity normally. We can be very lonely, but to be lonely is part of moral integrity if it's needed. So that's just a short input from my side. Thank you so much for inviting me. And maybe let me close with one sentence. One thing I was always impressed in India, I know a number of business leaders who said, look, my moral compass, I cannot do it myself. I need a spiritual leader. And many, without being in the public, they have their spiritual guru helping him. In other traditions, we have it in Christianity with pastors. So we need this support from somebody who helps us to be on track in our moral compass. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christophe. I like your concept of being in India, I like to call it Trinity, and I would like to say Trinity of ethics: heart, head, and hand. So that's a great concept you talked about. I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions, but before that, let me welcome, we already have 2 of our speakers, Oya Ozarslan. Welcome, Oya, to this Global Conclave, and also Keki Mistry. Welcome, Keki. And 2 more special guests. I see Mr. UK Sinha, the former chairman of SEBI. Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for joining us. And Charles Tilley, the CEO of IIRC from UK. Welcome, Charles. Now, let me just ask a question. You talked about dilemma, Christophe. I think the real test of the ethics of an individual or a company is when the interest of an individual or a company is at cross purposes with the interest of the larger good. How does one really in practice translate this concept into real practice?
Yeah, it's not easy to answer in general. I published a book, 2 books on cases on ethical dilemma with very concrete examples, and I think first of all, I think we need to be modest and say we cannot and do not need to be saints or gurus and we are all human beings. That means we also are able to accept or should be able to accept failures. Because if we want to not to fail, we cannot be entrepreneurs, we cannot be business people, we cannot be professors. We would just stay at home and do nothing. And doing nothing is a bigger moral problem than doing the wrong thing. I'm a bit extreme now in my pronunciation. So doing nothing is wrong. And doing something with a risk to not to be perfect is better. So, and that means also to solve a problem of a dilemma, not by thinking only black and white. Most of our decisions are in the gray area, somewhere in between. And to have the courage for these decisions, even if they are not fully perfect. But then, of course, we have criteria in ethics, which solution is the better of the two solutions, and which has to be absolutely avoided or excluded as a solution.
Thank you, Christophe. Ms. Sinha, may I take advantage of your presence? You've been one of the most value-based regulators and have done wonderful transformation of capital markets in India. And in the journey of your tenure also, you have faced various issues relating to business ethics. Any quick observations, sir?
One observation which I would like to make is that it's important to understand and guide the culture of the organization, culture of the corporation. We have several examples starting from the USA back to India, where one can identify, and I'm particularly referring to the role played by independent directors as well as senior management, that if they are careful about what culture the organization is following, then they can control a lot of things well in time. We have example of a large US bank where the culture was that for non-existent borrowers and account holders, car loans were sanctioned or car insurance was made and the amount was deducted. And we all know that in such cases, what happens and what is the ultimate fate of the company. So you are very right in your earlier observations that only companies which follow a good ethics, they are the ones who can survive for maybe 100 years or more. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Maybe one more question we can have, if anyone from our audience would like to ask.
Shailesh Bhai has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Christophe, that was a phenomenal presentation. Our compliments and thanks to you. We really enjoyed it very much. My question is that in India, we have a deeply held belief that it is from self-review and self-regulation that your truly ethical spirit arises. Do you share that view, or do you believe that we need the anchor of an external force?
Thank you very much for this question. I really believe in the balance. Self-regulation is key. As I said, with integrity, with character, we cannot escape and just say, oh, there is no law, so I can do what I want. No, we need this inner compass. And I think that is a key contribution that comes from your Indian culture, this high level of self-regulation. But I would balance it with a community orientation. In Christianity, for example, in Islam also, we say we are not believers on our own. We are part of a community, and the community helps us to do the right thing, or helps us to avoid the wrong thing. So I think the individual, in terms of self-regulation, is key, but I would balance it really with this support by the community is as key. And then the laws and regulations is a kind of institutionalized community. Yeah? We have laws which are decided by a community, by politicians, by parliaments. That's a community who should help the individuals when they are not able for self-regulation, because self-regulation Normally, it's only a very small, tiny group of people who are so strong that they can do it fully. But the majority, as I said, we are weak persons, and I want to work for the weak persons and not for the saints. They know their way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. I think that was a real treat by itself, and for managing time for us also. We are right at the 4:45 and 4:44 to be precise, and therefore we are ready for the next session. And I would like to sort of thank you. 1 minute. So we are going to now start a fireside chat, with two highly accomplished individuals, one from India and one from Turkey. And I would, myself and Shailesh Haribhakti, both of us would sort of try and get the best out of them because they have world of knowledge, world of experience. So let me first invite Professor Mani to formally introduce Mr. K.K. Mistry first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chauhan, and thank you, Professor Christophe. That was a wonderful start to this BMA Global Ethics Conclave. We are indeed delighted that we have with us Shri K.K. Mistry. Good evening, sir, and we welcome you on behalf of the Bombay Management Association. It's very difficult for anyone to not know HDFC in India. And perhaps anyone who knows HDFC Limited would have also read that one of the key persons who built this institution was none other than Mr. K.K. Mistry, completes around 40 years of service to this organization, leading it to the company that it is most admired as on today. He was also part of the team that created such powerful entities such as HDFC Bank, HDFC AMC, HDFC Standard Life, HDFC Ergo, just to name a few. A thought leader, a person who is always sought in several forums where wisdom is needed, be it CII, be it the Bombay Stock Exchange, and any other such national and international body. It's indeed our honor that you're here with us, sir, this evening, and we look forward to a very, very interesting discussion with Shri Mahendra Chauhan and, of course, our guest from Turkey, Ms. Oya Ozertlan. May I also take half a minute to welcome Shri Shailesh Haribhakti ji, our own past president. Sometimes it happens that we say, Ghar ki murgi dal barabar. That's a very famous Hindi quotation. But sir, for us, is our mentor, our guide. And I think all I can say about him is he is a thought leader on ESG and, of course, occupies positions as independent director and chairman of so many leading organizations because they believe in his integrity of thought, purpose, and action. Thank you so much, Shailesh Bhai, for being here with us and being there for BMA always. Welcome, Shri K.K. Mistry once again. And may I request Mr. Chauhan and Haribhakti ji to take on the session.
So thank you, Professor Mani. Let me very quickly welcome Oya Ozertlan. Oya, as some of you may have known through the brochure we circulated, is the member of Transparency International Board since 2017, and she's also the chairperson of the Ethics Committee of Transparency International. Welcome, Oya, to you. And thank you for acceding so readily to my invitation when I wrote to you. In her work with Transparency International, Oya has focused on business integrity and created tools for the private sector, which is extremely important. In her work on political corruption, she focused particularly on politicians' assets disclosures, as well as on election campaign financing. I wish we do a similar kind of thing in other parts of the countries in world, including India. Oya is an international lawyer. So with these words, Oya, I must tell you that our tryst with Transparency International goes way back to 2000. Transparency International comes up with the Corruption Perception Index. And, India's Corruption Perception Index ranking was very low in the international ranking. And we thought to ourselves, I scratched my head and spoke to a couple of like-minded friends, including Shailesh Bhai. We were together in Indian Merchants Chamber then. And we said, yes, we know that corruption is an issue in India, but we can't be that bad. So what I did is I engaged with Transparency International Board in Germany, and we got the then chairman, and we said, look, we would like to know what is the Transparency International's framework in terms of coming up with this ranking. And we found that the sample size that they were considering for India were from the states which are not so business-wise, leading states. So like Kerala, and they were going to other states and all. So then for 3 consecutive years, we had the, video conferencing with the board members of Transparency International. And I must tell you, many other things alongside happened, but the ranking of India improved by 12 notches in 3 years' time. So that is the background of our working with Transparency International. With that, I welcome you and Keki both. I know Keki is extremely busy. Thank you, Keki, for accepting my invitation despite of your very, very busy schedule. Let me first begin by asking first question to you, Oya. For most of our participants who are with us now, what is the specific role played by the Ethics Committee of Transparency International? Because you chair the Transparency International's Ethics Committee, and we also know that TI comes out with Corruption Perception Index that I talked to you. How does Ethics Committee of Transparency International engage with business leaders around the world?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and thank you very much for inviting to such an important event. It's actually honor and privilege for me to be speaking among these very distinguished speakers. And Transparency International, as you all know, has been founded in 1993 and has been working on fighting against corruption systematic way. So we see this corruption issue is not an incidental issue, but it's actually a systemic issue. So what we see, of course, business is a huge part in this, huge partner is fight in this fight. And when it comes to the ethics committee within board, within Transparency International, this is an internal committee. It only oversees the ethics and integrity matters across the TI movement. So our remit is basically any kind of ethical issue or any kind of a complaint when it's related to our chapters, to our staff, or to our board members within Transparency International. TI Ethics Committee, Board Ethics Committee does not ordinarily have any association with business or leaders external to TIS unless they raise the concern of an integrity violation within the secretariat or within the movement. And in that case, we take this matter on our hands. But we think that, we are an organization, we are a value-driven organization, and it's also quite important to keep ourselves to our values. So we have to be able to walk the talk. Otherwise, our values that we praise and we preach will lose importance. So we're actually trying to keep ourselves intact within the organization, within the movement.
Thank you. Kiki, let me quickly come to you. Day-to-day actions and decisions of ordinary employees can have far-reaching consequences. My question to you is, how can companies ensure that their business ethics are not abstract notions, but practical guides to how employees can act and behave?
First of all, Mahendra, thank you for calling me today. I think your question is a very important question. It goes down to the root of when you hire an employee, when you appoint an employee. So you have to have proper checks and balances. You have to focus in a big way or have people who are able to understand the level of integrity, check references and things like that. So starting point is hiring people. Second, I would say is culture. The culture which is set in the organization, the culture is extremely critical. You have to have an open door policy. Training programs have to be imparted. A clear message has to be sent that for whatever reason, a genuine mistake takes place, the genuine mistake will be condoned. But even the slightest, remotest sense of ethics or proper ethics not being followed will be strictly punished. You have to have severe punishment in the stray case where something like that does come up, and the severe punishment must mean expulsion. If there is any kind of ethical diversion, then there is no punishment less than asking the person to go. And to check out, you have to have a very strong whistleblower mechanism. A whistleblower mechanism where anybody can write to senior management, write to the board, write to ethics committee or whatever exists, and that would get inquired. So I think checks and balances have to be there all the time, but the culture is very important. And senior people have to set the example, and that example, once set by senior people, would be followed by people. I'll give you a minute to example of HDFC. We as a policy generally, and I say generally, there are of course exceptions, do not do lateral employment. We hire people fresh out of college and they work their way up the organization. And therefore, when we hire people, one of the basic things we look at is not necessarily just the intelligence or the aptitude of the individual, but also a lot about culture, background, where he comes from, family, things like that, which help the people who are doing the interview to understand the level of ethics that the person would probably have. And then that individual works his way up the organization, and therefore we are able to then train him, we are able to mold his thinking, we are able to find a career path for him. So it goes down to the basics of hiring a person.
Well said, Keki. With this, let me invite Shailesh Bhai now to sort of pose a question to Oya first and then to Keki. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Here it is. Okay.
You have to repeat, start again.
Oya, first of all, I want to express my immense pleasure in interacting with you. The only one objective that we had set for the whole year that I was president of the IMC was to improve India's ranking by 1 spot. And as Mahendra described, we improved it by several. So my year was fulfilled because of that. So thank you for that. Many years lag. This is 15 years ago.
Don't thank me. Thank yourself.
Thank you. Well, so Oya, my question is that just like you mentioned the committee that you have formed within Transparency International, many organizations across the world have ethics and compliance programs, which are meant to discover wrongdoing and then make sure that the consequences visit the person who has committed the wrongdoing. What is your experience in terms of, as you go around the world and as you discuss it with various people, are these programs really working and delivering their remit?
Thank you for asking that question. Actually, I mentioned that we see business an important stakeholder, important partner fighting against corruption. Because as we know, when we talk about corruption, it takes two to tango, and when business is not a active player in the action of business, the bribery or corruption, then actually we're strengthening this fight from one side, at least from one side. And those compliance programs, especially in the last 10 years, have developed in a tremendous manners, I have to say. All around the world, that there's at least the awareness raising in the business community that they have to be actively taking part in fighting against corruption, which is which is great indeed. And we also recognize that the many companies have reached a level of maturity in their anti-corruption programs. However, when we look out to the big picture, we don't see a corresponding decrease of corruption or decrease of corruption scandals involving companies globally. It still goes on. We can only conclude that the more needs to be done in a different manner with practical impacts, for instance. So the compliance is not a sort of a check in the box type of practice. It has to be understood quite well, especially the upper management of the company, and they have to be actually speaking out very loudly, so the people around the company and then their partners, their stakeholders, and any party that they interact with, to understand what the philosophy of the company is really. So that kind of approach that we need to see.
Absolutely. You need to get it up, raise the bar and keep raising it. Thank you. Keki, we went to college together. So Keki mentioned college. So I will recognize that we went to the same college and were in the same class. So Keki, great pleasure to have you here. My question to you is that the real test of ethics is that when there is a dilemma and the decision is at a cross purpose in terms of personal interest versus the larger interest of the corporation. How can organizations ensure that the manager concerned still takes the right decision, although it may hurt his or her personal interest?
Sailesh, I would say it's to do with the culture that is set in the organization. The same point I made even to the previous question. Culture is extremely important. Along with culture, you have to have proper safeguards, like you need to have a very good policy for disclosure of interest. Any kind of interest you have, you need to disclose that. And you need to have a very clear policy on conflict of interest. Very clear policy, which is punishable, severely punishable if there is any kind of breach on that. I'll give you an example. Let's take an example of a mutual fund. In a mutual fund industry, any person working, particularly the fund managers, will not be allowed to invest in shares. Otherwise, the easiest thing to do is to first invest in the share and then do front running. So you can stop that. And then in the very, very rare case that you were to find that there is any kind of instance where personal interest has been placed ahead of the corporate interest, you have to come down very, very heavily on that individual. And that very heavily means you have to effectively ask that person to go. And that fact should be well publicized. So once people know that this is the kind of action that would be, that would take place, people would just desist from doing this. But this is all prevention measures. The most critical thing is first having the culture which ensures that people would not do it. And that comes from having a very open door policy, continuously having training programs, having dialogues with the employee. The HR team should be on top of it, should be meeting people, impressing upon them, having training programs and things like that.
Thank you, Keki. Over to you, Mahendra.
Thanks. Thanks, Keki. I think a judicious mix of awards, rewards, and reprimand, I think, really does the work. So let me come again to you, Oya. Do you think that incentives to be ethical can change the behaviors dramatically? And what is Transparency International doing in this regard?
Well, unethical incentives, they can only be encountered by embedding the integrity into the business itself. It starts with business leader who provides strong, explicit, and visible support. Companies are called upon to implement compliance programs truly, properly, and the incentive should be able to, instead of the right incentive should be should be on the ability to meet the stakeholders' expectation, the increasing part of the stakeholders' expectation. But I'm talking about regulators, customers, investors, the whole society in general, to do the right thing, to avoid also prosecution, to avoid reputational risk, encourage business leaders to just responsible business and level the playing field. TI continues to collaborate with the business leaders all around the world, and we constructively engage actually with the business. We have, we have secretariat in Berlin, but we have over 100 chapters around the world, and then most of the chapters have corporate forums, corporate supporter forums, for them to specifically engage with the business to just work hand by hand in number of matters. Investing in corruption should not be solitary. Investing in anti-corruption should not be solitary pursuit. That's actually a strength in collective action. That's what we praise to collective action. The more business leaders investing in anti-corruption in their companies' efforts, their companies' compliance programs, and most importantly, understand the value in the practice. I guess as a civil society, TI, not only with the corporate supporter forums, but we engage in research programs, and then we make in-depth research, and then we always work with a data, data-driven type of research. We just highlight the the major issues when it comes to fighting against corruption, and not only in the public sector level, but also in the private sector level as well. We have some global indexes, not only CPI, but we have specific researches and specific indexes specifically for business. And I think that business leaders are going to take a lot of advantages of those researches.
Thank you. So, Keki, once again to you. What are your thoughts? You did mention very briefly about this at the time of selection, but I'd like you to give a little bit more details on from your experiences, that value-led approach, which means at the time of selection of the employees itself, there is an emphasis in finding a match between values of the company and values of those individuals, so that the individuals are intrinsically inclined and motivated to alter his or her behavior. Do you agree with this? And if yes,
absolutely.
How practical is it to find all employees like this?
Fortunately, Mahindra, we have been very lucky. We have over the years been having this policy, which I mentioned earlier, where we hire people fresh out of college and they work their way up the organization. And therefore, when we hire the person, he comes without any baggage. We're able to train him the way we want. We're able to imbibe the culture that we want within him. And we have to have, obviously, a very open door policy. It's also important to try and build an organization with the aim of creating a legacy. So it is something that the employees are proud of. And once the employees are proud of something like this, then automatically, they fall in line and they know what is the right thing to do at different points of time. So the whole ethos has to be about team spirit, about working as a team and not working as an individual. Team performance is far more important than what you do as an individual. And you have to build an organization on the principles of fairness, kindness, efficiency, and effectiveness. But fairness, kindness, and it with the right approach, the right degree of ethics brought in. But yes, there is training that is imparted to people who go to interview people at campuses. So we hire people fresh from these campuses, and the people who go to interview these candidates are themselves trained on what specifically they should be looking for. And as I said earlier, the most important thing that we look at is the ethics, the behavior of the individual more than anything else. Because at the end of the day, business is not rocket science. We don't need geniuses all the time, but we need people with commitment. We need people with the highest degree of ethics.
Right. I think it's a lot more easier to mold the youngsters in a particular mold or a culture. But let me pick your brain for another minute. One more thing that many researchers you must have heard about, that millennials and the youngsters, they like to work for value-based companies. And it is particularly today. Now, when you pick up these people, they are highly, they've been brought up in a very different culture. They've grown up rather in a very different culture. But when they come into an organization, they find senior people, sometimes indulging into unfair practices. And you talked about whistleblower policy and all. They are too young and they are very scared, to really blow a whistle. How do you tackle that such things do not happen?
Well, I think whistleblowing is important because through the whistleblowing mechanism, you can get to know a lot of what is happening in the organization. Having said that, let me also say that the whistleblowing mechanism is often misused. So, you need to balance this in the right way, because you can get competitors, you can get unhappy employees coming and doing whistleblowing. But the important thing is to be able to track every case where there is a whistleblowing that has happened and to try and get to the bottom of it. I think ethical behavior is something which has to be imbibed in people. It can be developed by training and awareness, and it needs to be imbibed in employees, that they have to adopt fair business practices, follow the spirit of the law, build a culture of working with integrity, respect diversity. See, we must understand that ethics is a performance enabler, and it is not just a tick in the box kind of an approach. It's an extension of a person's conscience, personal behavior. Value system is paramount, strong moral compass, accountability and responsibility is something which has to be, pinned on people. So I think it can be done. It's not such a, once you build an organization and once the senior people set the example, you gave the example, you mentioned that a person comes to an organization and finds that there are senior people who are doing things which they should not be doing. Obviously, that's something completely wrong, because the example has to start at the top. If the senior most people are not practicing the highest degree of ethical behavior, then how do you expect people down the line to do it?
Yes, so they get disillusioned.
Absolutely. So therefore, hiring the senior people is obviously even more critical than hiring people down the line, because they are the ones who have to set the example.
Thank you, Kiki. Over to you, Shalil.
Thank you, Mahendra. Oya, both of you have been speaking a lot about training and development efforts, which may change outcomes and diminish the incidence of bribery and corruption. But what are the tweaks that need to be made in the particular context of ethical conduct, which makes these programs better? Is it quizzing people to make sure that they've understood what the right behavior is and what it means and how it should happen? Is it setting examples? Is it bringing examples from outside and sharing it with them? What is it that truly improves the effectiveness of these training and development programs in your experience?
Thank you. I mean, I guess starting point is the training on awareness raising in the first place. And especially for a company that just starting a new compliance program or deciding to focus on those issues, I think they just have to, make the awareness raising among all employees. There should be a one basic standard trainings for everybody. Then we have to go to the risk areas that, we have to spot, highlight the areas that are actually risky for the business itself. And it could be different from one company to another. So it just have to be specifically tailored to the needs of the company, I should say. And that specific target audience and then their business risk, they should be they should be very well studied, and to increase the knowledge on anti-corruption. I think it makes a lot of difference, because most of the business people, they're just on the ground and trying to do their best when it comes to the making profitable, better company, but they're not actually aware of it. And then some of the things that are actually maybe seem to be part of a practice, and then they may not be aware of that. That's an unethical and it's a risky for the anti-corruption risk. It creates an anti-corruption risk. So it could be number of things actually said by you, like quizzes and stuff. And I think the scenarios and then solving the scenarios and asking people how do they react on those situations, that could be one of the things that they actually put themselves into the shoes of the real situation, that they basically encounter in the ground. So, but I mean, I'm a true believer to the training. I think it should not be like a one time and then, okay, we have done it and we have trained everybody. I think the more you do it, and then periodically you do it, and then you see the difference at the end. And there was actually one study, as I remember, even the ethics code, people, we have ethics code, and most of the companies have ethics code, but they're beautiful, but they mostly stay in the shelf. And or the people just sign up on it when they start the work, but then they forget about it. They have done a study, and then they have found out that after people reading the ethic code once again, they actually score better on those quizzes, because those things stay there and then we forget about it. I think this is quite important to
reinforce and keep coming back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Keki, may I raise a very interesting dilemma? All of us believe that ethics ought to be there, and you also seem to mention that it has to be a culture. It has to start with the person coming fresh, and then you being able to create that whole value system. But let us say you take a person who met all your expectations straight out of college, but external circumstances change that person's approach and attitude. One, how do you pick up these kind of changes and things that can influence behavior that may not be expected? And can values and ethics be retaught, or can you change the way that people by DNA operate? And if so, it would be wonderful to share those experiences from HDFC with this wonderful audience we have today.
So, Sailesh, it is obviously a lot easier to hire people and then train them and develop the culture. Yes, in a stray case, if there is a external event which happens, which causes that person's mindset to change or anything like that. But my personal experience is that if you have created that culture and if you have created that oneness in the team, then usually you don't see these things happening. I mean, like for example, practically what would happen is, it's happened, I'm sure, a number of times. An employee faces some difficulty, like let's say there's a serious illness in the family and he's very badly in need of money. Now, what does he do at a time like this? Does he go and give a loan to a wrong fellow and take a bribe? Or would he come to the company? Would the company encourage him to tell him that, look, I have this problem, can you help me out? So absolutely. The latter obviously is what you have to practice. So you have to have that trust that employees must have that trust in the organization, which would enable them to go to their bosses, to their, whether it's a branch manager, whether it is whoever it, vice chairman, whoever it is, to go and talk to them and say, look, I have this problem, can you help me out? And if people see that the organization helps out people during these difficult times, people will never do anything good. It just works on people. I'll just give you one example, take a minute more.
Sure,
We had an instance once of an employee who faced a very severe medical problem. He had cancer and a very, very bad form of cancer. We looked after him for 2.5 to 3 years. We took care of all his medical expenses, every single thing. Not just a company contributed, but we as individuals, senior people contributed. So that develops so much of faith, so much of trust in the organization that people will never do anything which would, which is not correct or which is not the right thing to do.
Fantastic, fantastic, Keki. That really touched my heart. It is so important to set that very high bar of taking care of people so they never stray from the course. Thank you. That was wonderful. Mahendra, the last few questions from you.
Thank you. Well, but at this juncture, let me extend a warm welcome to Swami Prakarshanandji. He has joined Swamiji. Hari Om, and welcome to this global conclave on ethics. If Swamiji is there and Professor Mani, you can unmute him. I will just like to say welcome to him.
Yeah, Swamiji is here. Hari Om.
Hari Om and Pranam to everyone.
Hari Om, Pranam.
Pranam.
So we will soon be with you, Swamiji. Bear with us. So let me come to you, Oya. What effect do you feel national culture has on being ethical? And what is the experience of Transparency International in this space?
I mean, you know that the CPI, Corruption Index, Corruption Perception Index, and then we have been doing it over 25 years already, and it ranks 180 countries around the world. And despite regional diversities and everything, what we see is that more than 2/3 of the countries score below 50, which is the score that means that there is a widespread corruption in that country. So despite some progress, we feel that most of the countries fail to tackle corruption effectively. So it doesn't matter what country is, the issues are pretty much the same, and the solutions that we found is pretty much the same as well. The bottom countries that we see it, mostly the countries with the higher corruption risk, are the South Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela. But I mean, these are the countries not only with the high corruption risk, but they are also the countries with the high in conflicts, chaos, or less in democratic values, less respect to human rights, and very grave human rights aspect as well. So, so that portrays a bigger picture for us. The corruption is also fostering some of the places that we have less in rules, less respect to rule of law, for instance, and less democracy. And so that's one of the things. But when it comes to the culture specifically, I mean, I wouldn't say there is a compelling evidence that any particular religious or ethnic groups is especially prone and susceptible to corruption. And but ethnically fractionalized societies that seems to be often more corrupt, or polarized societies that also seem to be much more prone to corrupt, because when it comes to the polarized societies, we see that it's almost like a fan attitude. You're part of this group, you're supporter of this party, so then you're inclined to close your eyes and to hide some of the irregularities going on there. So I think it's much more than the culture. Culture itself in specific countries, but there is a culture of corruption, and then there is a culture of integrity. I think there are, if we're going to talk about the culture clashes, there are actually two cultures.
Thank you.
Interesting.
About cultures, they say their cultures are not good and bad. Cultures are different. But it's very, very important that you strongly dissuade unfair practices and strongly encourage the fair practices. And that, the mechanism of reward and reprimand, as I referred to earlier, at the national level, if it can be put in place, if we can get it right, I think things will be much different. Thank you, Oya, for that. Let me come to Keki for the last question. Keki, this morning we had a very, very interesting Director Power e-meeting where we discussed the role of board in creating a purpose and value-driven culture. And we discussed that, at the board level, the chairman, the independent directors, and which Mr. Sinha also alluded to earlier, Mr. UK Sinha is with us too. Quarter to quarter, the board meets, we come up with these concepts of ESG, integrity, fair, diversity, inclusion, everything. But I think converting or translating these concepts into action within the organization is, of course, CEO and his team. But coming to the last mile, an example was given of a medical representative who is the last salesperson who, when he goes to the chamber of a doctor to sell a particular medicine, what kind of tall claims, if he makes about the benefits that his product or his company's product referred to, or any other salesman makes, very, very false sort of promises to the customers. How does one control that streak? Because there's a pressure of target achieving and all. And just one small employee at that last mile can really sullen the reputation of the whole organization. How do you ensure that that weakest link becomes strong?
I think the only answer, Mahendra, is training and culture. I'm sorry, it's the same, more or less the same answer to one of the earlier questions. It's around culture. You have to have targets. Of course, every organization has to have targets, but the targets have to be set in a manner in which they are attainable without, in this example, tall claims being made. What you're talking of is very similar to, let's say, an insurance company. It's a very common practice, and you probably have heard about it very often, that some insurance companies indulge in mis-selling. So you sell a product giving benefits which are really not there or which are not really useful to that individual. There is an instance of a bank in America where, all kinds of things were sold to people in a wrong way. So I think it is a tone which has to be set at the top. The board and the senior management is the custodian of a company's value and culture. There have to be periodic risk assessments because reputational risk is the biggest risk. No, every organization faces reputational risk, and therefore what measures you are taking to ensure that your reputation is kept intact is what will determine whether that last mile employee, the lowest level employee, whether he does something, in terms of mis-selling. It's important to recognize that success is never short-term. Success has to be long-term. When you're setting goals, your goals cannot be what you will achieve in this quarter or the next quarter or the quarter after that. Your goals have to be what you will do 5 years from now. Where will you be 10 years from now? And to get to that 5-year, 10-year level, you have to have the highest levels of transparency and the highest levels of ethics. Otherwise, you will never get there.
Thank you, Keki. So, like every good thing has to come to an end, I think this fireside chat also has to come to an end. I want to profusely thank Oya for sparing your time. And I must tell you that when Shailesh Bhai and I worked together and we improved the ranking of India by 12 notches, we would want to once again engage with Transparency International Board and have a relook at the methodology and the sample size, because now India is very different than 10 years ago. So we will once again like to engage with you. What are your sample size and what is your methodology, and can India really take, because now what do you call ease of doing business? There's a lot of focus. What Prime Minister is doing. So we would like to be continuously in touch with you once again. It was lovely to touch base with Transparency International. Thank you, Keki. You had to go at 5:30, and I think we have been able to manage the time well. And thank you for giving me time. I was all the time anxious, if you were to go to Dubai or somewhere else, but I'm so glad that you've been able to give us time. And your insightful comments have really, really helped, particularly for the Indian managers, which are the real domain of Bombay Management Association. We will be in touch with you once again. Thank you, both of you. With this, I bring this fireside to a chair. And thank you, Shailesh Bhai, for being such a wonderful,
Thank you. No,
colleague.
It was a pleasure, Mahendra. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now we come to the next session of this global conclave on ethics, and we have a special address. As I told you that Swami Prakashananji has already joined us. Is Swamiji there?
Yes.
Professor Mani, I don't
Yes,
see him.
he's here. Yes, he's here with us. He's here with us.
Okay, his camera, I would like to have Darshan Swamiji.
Yeah, it's there. Hari Om.
Hari Om. We can't see you. Can you see him?
Yeah, I can see you all.
Oh, yeah. Yes, now we can see him.
Yes.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
थैंक यू वेरी मच. बहुत बहुत आभार आपका कि आपने हमारे इस कार्यक्रम में आने की अनुकंपा की. Let me welcome you with heart and hands both, and the mind. We talked about trinity of heart, mind, and hand, by one of our foreign speakers.
Yeah.
And I told him that this is the trinity of ethics that he spoke to us. Let me first, before we begin, invite Professor Mani, the president of Bombay Management Association, to formally introduce Swamiji.
Thank you, Mr. Chavan. I want to obviously place on record the wonderful Jugalbandi that you and Shailesh Bhai led on this lovely fireside chat that we had, so full of enriching wisdom. And very logically, it's our pleasure and delight to have you with us, Swamiji. Thank you so much for gracing the Bombay Management Association. जैसा कहते हैं आप दिल्ली से बॉम्बे आए हैं लेकिन डिजिटली आए हैं. आपका स्वागत है, and we are very, very blessed to have you with us in our midst.
Thank you.
May I venture to share with all of us who are present here today that Swamiji is a veterinary doctor by profession and belongs to Amchi, Mumbai, where he practiced for quite some time before he migrated to the so famous Chinmaya mission at Powai. And since then, Swamiji has contributed to building so many youth and their thought processes so that India becomes stronger and stronger. His passion is in the area of youth empowerment and has always been involved in Chinmaya mission locations all over India and the world. In fact, as they say, his journey towards empowering youth took him from Mumbai down to Goa, and now he is stationed in Delhi, though he supports various activities worldwide. A very, very eminent author. He has some excellent publications to his credit. And I must also tell you, he has such a melodious voice that he has recorded a couple of CDs related to Guru Smarnam and Puja Vidhi. Who better could have Mr. Mahendra Chavan invited this evening to talk to us on personal ethics? Pranam Swamiji, and we are looking forward to hear your pearls of wisdom. Swagat hai aapka.
Thank you, Professor Mani. Swamiji is going to talk to us about how to inculcate and sustain personal ethics. As I told you in the beginning of our program, that we are touching all the three aspects of ethics: business ethics, personal ethics, and judicial ethics. So Swamiji, as I would request you, as they say, mind is man, as the mind is, so is the individual. How do we remove the carelessness from our mind is one question I would request you to address during your discourse to us.
Yes.
As also, can ethics be taught or values be inculcated late in life after one gets into adulthood? If yes, how? These two are my requests, if you can incorporate them in your discourse. Over to you,
Yeah.
Swamiji. Hari Om once again.
Yes, thank you. Hari Om, Namaste to one and all. Present here today for this e-conclave, beautiful sort of meeting and session. I am extremely happy to be with you all because from different part of globe, people are joined here for this e-conclave. I also have a great joy because the topic you have selected is very appropriate, and that's ethics. Let me share some of my thoughts with you all. See, what is ethics if we understand it? Ethics is a branch of knowledge which is concerned to the human moral values, which influences the conduct of a person. That is ethic. Now, as we all are human beings, we are gifted with a very special and wonderful thing that is called as intellect. What is so special about this intellect? This intellect of human being has a very special capacity called as discrimination. Human beings can discriminate between real and unreal, also between the good and bad, right and wrong. It is possible by following certain value system. Now, what is and how this value system is developed? Let me just throw some light on it. See, this value system is in every culture. So let me just first think and share about culture. What is culture? When set of values followed by large number of people, when set of values followed by large number of people for sufficiently long duration and found to be very effective in these three things. First, there will be a peace because of the values which they have followed. Second, there will be a harmony. And the third, there will be a progress in the society. So, because of this effect, these values are internalized. They are accepted in the society as a interim part of their culture. So this is very important aspect. Now, those values add great beauty to our life. Let me just share something from the Vedic standpoint. In every country and religion, we have do's and don'ts. Now, these do's and don'ts are not for torturing any human being, but these do's and don'ts are for the proper peace, harmony, and progress in the society. Think. Vedic culture or Vedic tradition as well as Vedic knowledge brings two important findings called as duties. So the first duty is a general duty, samanya duty called as dharma. So samanya dharma, general duty. What is the general duty? Please pay attention. This general duty, the points what we are going to understand are absolutely required or to be followed by each and every person of the society, irrespective of caste, creed, sex, and religion. Now, this is very important aspect. Irrespective of caste, creed, sex, and religion. Almost all religion as well as every country or society, they understand and they have these values that is called as general duties in their life. What are they? So general duties for every human beings are 1, 2, 3. I'll give an example. First, honesty. It's a general duty. Now let me give an example. If someone says or asks, Swamiji, just tell me, where should I be honest and which day I should be honest? Where means what? Should I be honest in my home, or should I be honest in my working place, or should I be honest with my near and dear friends or relatives? The answer is honesty to be followed 24/7. This is a very important aspect. This is not an option, or this is not a concession given to anyone that you can follow honesty here and you can be dishonest there. You can be honest on Monday and you can be honest on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. No, that is not correct. So this is one example I have given. So like that, all the values, all the moral points called as values. So one, honesty. Second is punctuality. Third is devotion, that's called as dedication to your action. Fourth is called as love. Fifth is called as forgiveness. Sixth is called as compassion, etc. Righteousness. And these are n number of moral values. They are coming under general duties of every person in the whole universe. Now, let me go to the specific duty. Specific duty is for a specific role, because we all are doing different role in different situations. Let me give an example. If a person is doctor in the hospital, the same person can be a husband in the house. That same person can be a son or a friend in different situation. So what is the specific duty now? When this person is in hospital, his specific duty is he is allowed to do operation. That means he can cut the body and remove what is not required, and he can do whatever required to make the patient healthy. This is the specific duty of a doctor. Now, this duty is only for him and him alone. We cannot do that at all, and we are not supposed to do that at all. Second example I can give. Policeman. When the policeman comes to his office called as police station, and if there is a criminal, a hardcore criminal, and he is not speaking the truth, then the policeman can use the third-degree treatment to make him speak. And that is a specific duty only for a policeman and not any one of us. And that's also because of specific situation and not all the time. So this is called a specific duty. So the duties like leadership is a specific duty of a politician. or administration officer. Then there is called a soldier, a specific duty for a soldier. Also the mother and father, they have the specific duties, and so on and so forth. So when I said about the general duties as well as the specific duties, let me just tell something about this general and specific duties. When everyone follows, there is always a peace, harmony, and progress in the society. But what happens due to misunderstanding, due to wrong concept, people get distracted from the path of righteousness and they start following something which is called as unrighteous path. And that's how there is a difficulty or there is a disturbance and disharmony in the society or in the organization. Let me just give a beautiful thing said by Swami Chinmayanandaji. Swami Chinmayanandaji, whom we call as Pujya Gurudev, said beautifully. He said there are 3 stages of human beings, or in their life rather. The first one is people, those who do an action without knowledge, is equal to confusion. So action done without the knowledge is equal to confusion. There are set of people, those who have knowledge but they do not act, that is equal to imagination. Third set of people, they have right knowledge and they act very correctly, that leads to total transformation. And this total transformation is very positive, which brings a total change, a positive change in this person. And it affects in the integration of his personality. This integration of personality is because of the right value system. Now, what happens when there is a disturbance and wrong concept or misunderstanding that we will see little later? Now, let me just take up these 2 questions given by the organizers. The first question is, mind is man, as the mind, so is the individual. How do we remove the carelessness from our mind? That's the question. So it is very true that as the mind, so we are. Let me just explain it more for the better understanding of everyone. Like a body is a gross instrument for every action, then what happens? Because we have this body as an instrument, like a hand is instrument, we can act by our hand to do some action. So now there is a subtle instrument which is called as mind. Mind is a subtle instrument. It is nothing but flow of thoughts. So now just please note here, when there is a negative thought, a person becomes negative. When there is a positive thought flowing through a mind, the persons become positive. Let me give one more example. If someone has an angry thought, then what happens? This person becomes angry. Now what happened? Because of the thoughts of our mind, our body is responding to those thoughts, and that actually mind is showing its color through this body as an instrument. So this, I just wanted to make it more clear that how a man is nothing but his mind, or as a mind, the So we are. Next important point, that how do we remove this carelessness from our mind? See, Vedanta explains everything by a principle called as cause and effect. Vedanta explains everything by the principle called as cause and effect. Now, when I see the carelessness, it is an effect. So what is the cause of it? Please note, there are two important causes. One, which is called as lack of focus. Lack of focus. This is the first cause of the carelessness. Second is the fickle nature of the mind. Second is fickle nature of the mind. Now, when I take a reference from Bhagavad Gita, let me just explain beautifully. Arjuna also asked a similar question to Bhagavan Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 6. He asked, "O Bhagavan, how am I to improve the quality of my mind?" So Bhagavan answered beautifully. Bhagavan gave 2 pointers to Arjuna to improve his mind quality. First pointer is remove the distractions. Remove the distractions and make your mind one-pointed. Second, it is possible by right practice. So remove all distractions, all temptations which are causing, this is called as the disturbance of the mind, and which is possible by following the right practice, right knowledge. So, two things. One is right practice, one is remove the distractions from your mind. That is the basis of removing this carelessness. Now let me go more deep, as our scriptures explains everything very, very correctly. The quality of the mind depends on 3 gunas of Prakruti. Gunas means quality, Prakruti means nature. What are they? Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Now this is very interesting. What is that? See, every quality, that is guna, has a characteristic. Sattva has a characteristic. What is that? When there is a prominent sattva guna, then the mind is stable, focused, peaceful, sensitive, creative. These are the characteristics of sattva guna. Now second, rajasic guna, called as rajasic quality. The first is very competitive, very active, very fickle, very egoistic. These are the qualities of rajasic person. Third, which is called as tamasic guna. What are the qualities? Casualness, carelessness, insensitive, destructive, and so on. These are the qualities of a tamasic person. Now just imagine how a person should be prominently sattvic. That I'm going to ask, that I'm going to answer now. Because unless and until a person has a sattva guna in his mind, that person cannot be stable, that person cannot be creative, that person cannot be stable, that person cannot be very, very focused. 3 important principles everyone has to follow. First is our intake, called as ahara. We are taking food through all our orifices, through all our senses. Like eyes are seeing, that's a food for eyes. Ears are listening, That's a food for ears. Then so on and so forth. So every intake, what goes inside directly affects the quality of the mind. Like, let me give an example. If someone takes a liquor, and if it is a hard liquor, what happens? The mind completely gets diluted and it starts acting very differently. Okay, this is one simple example of intake. Now, second important is association, called as vihara. Association with different people around you. If in Hindi, it is beautifully said, Jaisa sang, vaisa rang. That means that as you are associated with people, as you have your inner circle with you, as you have your people with you, and the quality of their thoughts also influenced a lot in your life, in your thinking pattern. So, second is association. If the association is negative, then this person bound to have the negative thoughts. Next important point is ahara, I have spoken, vihara, I have spoken. Now, vichara. Vichara is called as thinking process. Our thinking is very much influenced by the world around us in different situations, in different times, and because of different aspects of our life. So, by taking care of these three things, person can be prominently in Sattva Guna. So, that's how a person can improve his quality of the mind. Now, let me take up the second question. The second question is, can ethics be taught or values be inculcated late in life after one gets into adulthood? If yes, how? Very good question. First answer of can ethics be taught or values be inculcated late in life after one gets into adulthood? If yes, how? It is yes. It is possible. It is possible. Now, let me just tell you what is the way of understanding it or getting it. So I just use word, now I'm going to use one different word. Instead of inculcating, I am going to use a word realizing. Please note this. So why am I using these different words? Let me just explain. Values can be inculcated when the mind is very in a primitive state called as in childhood. Childhood, the mind is growing and such mind is very innocent. That innocent mind can be molded quite easily or very smoothly. Why? Because there is a very strong connection with parents or with teachers. And therefore, this child learns because of a great faith and trust between both the parents as well as teacher. Now, when the same child now grows and he becomes a mature adult person, it is difficult to inculcate value at that time, but it is possible to change the quality of the mind when this person realizes the importance of it. So, understand, there is nothing difficult in this whole world. Why I use this phrase? Because let me just explain you some example. There is one person, a lady, when she was traveling in a train, if I am not wrong, her name is Anupama Sinha. and she's from Lucknow. She has written a beautiful book also. So she met with a sort of wrong people. There was a fight, and these people, they threw her out of the train. And because of that, she had a very bad injury on her leg, and she was there for 2 days on the railway track because it was a very sort of out of the town area. But some people could locate her, and then the operation was done. But her leg was amputated. Now everyone was very sympathetic towards this girl. But she says, I don't want this sympathy because it kills my inner will. So she declared that I am going to climb Everest. Now just imagine, please understand, an amputated leg and a girl with such sort of stature wants to go and climb the Everest. People laughed, but she never got distracted from her goal. She did practice. She removed all distractions from her mind. And one day she could reach to the top of Everest. Now this is extremely important to understand that how a person when realizes the importance of something can achieve anything in life. Let me give two another examples. One example is of Swami Chinmayanandaji, our Punja Gurudev. See, he was a theist when he was in college. And he was then, after the independence of India, he was working in Herald newspaper. He was a journalist. And that time also he had the same thought pattern. But one day he met a great sant, Swami Shivananda Maharaj from Divine Life Society, Rishikesh. And it happened so that effect of the association of a great master could change his complete thought pattern, and he started studying scriptures, believing in the Almighty Supreme Truth also. Second important incident from his life, he used to smoke. After a long time, even after his sannyasa diksha, he used to smoke, but he could realize that this does not go with the sannyasa dharma. So he left it with his right practice and removing all the temptations, all the wrong thoughts from the mind. Second example, which I would like to quote here, of Mahatma Gandhiji, as it is beautifully explained by him in his Experiment with the Truth. What does he explain? I don't have to go into details, but he was very passionate and lusty in his mind. But he could grow above it by following the righteous path and by having a higher goal in life. So therefore, my answer to the second question, it is possible. But when a person realizes the importance of it and ready to gain it for one's own peace, one's own harmony, one's own integration of the personality.
Thank you, Swamiji. We are so grateful to you. You have really given us a recipe for how to inculcate and sustain personal ethics. If I can just 2 points that I picked up as a takeaway is ahar, vihar, and vichar, which is intake, association, and thinking. And if we do that, it will bring peace, harmony, and progress in our life.
Yes.
I wish our members of Bombay Management Association, as well as our participants from 14 different countries across the globe, have understood and taken, because this is a spiritual discourse, not a religious discourse. And this is not an Indian discourse, but this is a global discourse. So thank you very much. We are eternally grateful to you for sharing your wisdom and time with us. God favoring us in future, we will be in touch with you.
Thank you for everyone to be with us.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you. Yeah, Hari Om. Now, in the interest of time, I'll have to, skip in because our next speaker, Mr. Mukundan, has to leave a little early, and therefore I would like to sort of quickly get on to my friend, old-time friend, Ernest Fernandez, and request him. Ernest, hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you,
You're on
Mahindra.
mute.
Yeah. Good to see you, Mahindra.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. May I request you to kindly formally introduce Mr. Mukundan, because he's going to bring a corporate perspective as to how to build a culture of ethics in business, and I know, if my memory serves me right, even you have worked for Tata Group, in past, and I thought, you would love to sort of do this honor to us for Bombay Management Association.
Yes, certainly. I'm happy to introduce Mr. Mukundan. He's the MD and
I think
CEO.
your face is half visible.
Yeah. Can you say, is
Yes,
it okay?
I think, yes, you will have, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Mukundan
Yes,
is the
we can see you better now.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Mukundan is the MD and CEO of Tata Chemicals. Tata Chemicals is one of the largest producers of soda ash globally and is one of the old companies in the Tata Group. Mr. Mukundan is from IIT Roorkee, and he is also an MBA from Delhi University. Mr. Mukundan has a very distinguished career in Tata's. He joined the Tata Administrative Service in 1990. I think Mr. Harish Bhatt, who spoke to us last week, was also from Tata's and told us about the history of Tata's last week. Welcome, Mr. Mukundan, to this meeting, and we look forward to your panel, to this discussion at our panel.
Thank you, Ernest. Let me add my word of welcome to you, Mr. Mukundan. Here we meet twice in a day. In the morning also we met each other electronically. We heard since morning one of the international speakers on ethics, and he talked about heart, head, and hand. We heard the fireside chat, with K.K. Mistry, and from Transparency International, Oya, who is the chairman of the Ethics Committee and is board member of Transparency International. We heard a spiritual guru. So we have had several perspectives on ethics. We thought a practitioner, and particularly from a business house, which is synonymous to ethics and purpose-driven culture that we discussed in the morning, it'll be interesting to have your perspectives. May I welcome you to please share your thoughts.
Thank you, Mahindra, and thank you for inviting me to speak and share some thoughts here. But I feel fairly, very hesitant in front of such an illustrious group of people here, with Honorable Justice B.N. Sri Krishna also being here. I mean, so if I don't say anything, if I say something which is please take that as inexperience and not knowing the matter deep enough. So I will start with that disclaimer first. But I'm going to speak about what I've observed in the group, what I've learned from people like Dr. Irani and Mr. Tata and all others who have sort of built this in us. And what I say is an outcome of 30 years of going through the same process every day, almost at work, and carrying it along and working with the team to build that culture, which is ethical culture. So three broad things which I think at the company level, at the business level, we all need to do. One is that we all know this, it's leadership by action, not just by words or statements which you put on the wall. So every act which a leader does, I think the organization is watching. So I think leaders are under spotlight and they need to act in a manner which is ethically right. And if that happens, people take the message down. Second is a very clear communication of non-negotiable. There are boundary conditions, and those non-negotiables are what, I remember Dr. Irani sort of telling us when we joined the group, there are only 4 or 5 ways you can leave the group. One is you can resign, you can retire, you may have health issues, or you do something which, he defined it. In those days, we didn't have code of conduct. he defined it as you do something which your grandmother would not like to see as headline in newspaper next day. That is all he defined it as. So it was as broad as that. So the message was very clear. Don't do anything which, if it is put as a headline and your grandmother is not going to approve of it, don't do any of those elements, and don't allow your team to do it. And lastly, stories and rituals. When I say this, this was a story which he told us and that stayed with me, and sort of I'm explaining this to you. Overall, why ethics matter, if you come back to that, I think reputation matters more. And reputation, I'll use the word reputation and I move on from there on exactly what we do as a company, what we do as an entity and an institution. And reputation for us is not what you say, but it is what you do. Or it is not it is what you do, not what you say. But more importantly, it is what others say about you, and even more importantly, what others say about you when you're not in the room. I think that is the critical piece about reputation. And in that, we have used a model internally, which is what I think most management students look at and say it is a Johari window concept. And I think the same applies for organizations. You've got this open area which is known to self, known to others. There is this dark zone which is unknown to you as well as unknown to the outside world. And there is a blind spot which it's unknown to you, but the world knows that's a problem with you, and a hidden self which you know, but you don't want to reveal to the world. And the only way you can address this is through two mechanisms. One is being open to feedback. And secondly, I would say doing self-disclosure all the time. I'll circle back to these two principles at a later point. One of the first things I just also wanted to sort of say is that when we joined the group, we were told, this is 30 years ago. And at that time, the 1990 was the year when the great, the whole point about India's liberalization had started. And we were very clearly told the era of license from Delhi is over. The license to operate in the future will be given by stakeholders, especially communities around us, our customers, our employees. And today with social media, the community definition has become much wider, much beyond the immediate community we operate in. And clearly, as an approach, what we have done within the company is to frame a set of codes and behaviors which we think we need in every one of our action, which we call as Tata Code of Conduct. That is what we follow. And we also have an excellence model called Tata Business Excellence, but I'll focus more on the Code of Conduct. And what we've done is we've operationalized this Code of Conduct in a way that every year we send out a survey document to all the stakeholders who actually rate us in the way we have performed on this Code of Conduct. And we get an annual score on how we have done. And this annual feedback is given to boards of companies. My board gets a report. And also it goes to the group chairman as a feedback that these companies have got this kind of a rating in the Code of Conduct. And we know what areas we need to improve. We study that deeply, and we sort of every year go. So I can tell you one of the improvements we had this whole issue of helpline people could call if there was an ethical breach. But one of the feedback was make that as an independent helpline, which is not run by the company, but it is run by an independent body. So actually, we then have appointed one of the 4 auditors to sort of manage that helpline, and they do this independent point. So they don't even tell us who has complained, who has raised the concern, who has raised an issue which we think we should have handled differently. I think that has really helped us. It came through a feedback of such a process when we went out and looked for. The other key element is about board level processes. These are very important. The tone is set at the top, tone is set right at the board, and the board, the audit committee, the risk committee, we talk about whistleblower process. All these are very critical element of, and in that there are other layers also in terms of, the POSH committee, which is the prevention of sexual harassment, the whole series of committees which we have set up. I think they're all important. Even in a small committee, while you may not have a small company, while you may not have these formal committees, it's just about 2 or 3 people getting together and addressing these issues in a formal manner always helps to check the box. The second piece of this, one is the board and leadership level issue. The second element I would call is the whole issue related to public disclosure. where we do come out with reports which talks about sustainability reporting, integrated reporting, and we also disclose how many kind of breaches were there in the company in terms of ethical issues and so how they were resolved. And these are all part of the public document which we put out. Then there are, of course, internal processes which we have, which sort of starts with, we have a process of training, onboarding. Every year we sort of have to sign up and agree that we will follow this code of conduct. And then there are, we have now devised it to such an extent that for many of these elements, for example, prevention of corruption, we've got a whole series of workshop you attend. After that, there's a quiz taken on the computer, and your screen gets frozen unless you go through the quiz. So everybody has to do it. Even I have to pass, and you have to get 9 out of 10, which means 90% mark. And that one which you didn't get, you have to read it 3-4 times, that section, so that you don't forget that this is the way that section is. So there is a constant process of embedding. The way we have approached it is that the problem is not going to be when things are black and white. The problem always arises when it's a shade of gray. And that is where judgment call comes. That is why training these dilemmas, we call it dilemmas, is very, very important. And we also have some of the core principles. I'll come down to that because I think there is such a great set of people here who could add a lot more value to this. Certain core set of principles we follow is that when in doubt, disclose. Now, I'm not saying publicly disclose, but disclose at least to few other people so that they can help and guide you. I think many of us are scared when we find something wrong and we don't want to talk about it. And the moment you stop talking about it, you can't solve the problem. So we always say disclose, share. That is why the board is there. And if it's a problem even beyond the board, go and find out with other stakeholders. And the moment you reach out to others, many times, and I can tell you once our shipments went and berthed itself in a port called Bandar Abbas. And there was Iran sanctions at that point of time. There was no material discharged. And suddenly this became a big issue that, we had no clue. But we went and disclosed to the US authorities that our ship had berthed there. They, of course, went through the process of, and then they said they closed the case. So many times when you disclose yourself, the case issue sensitivity becomes much, much less. Second is bring outsiders into policy making. We are all scared of NGOs. We are all scared of public institutions. But I think there is a process of reaching out and engaging with them, which is very, very critical. And the third element is about making decision makers part of the solution. Many times when you go to the decision maker in the government, in the other facets of the organization, and you sort of, in good faith, you discuss the issues, many times they would come out with solutions. And don't view reputation, sustainability, and things like ethics as one more thing to do. It's not check the box, but it is core part of business, core part of business strategy, core part of leadership issue. And I think as long as that is embedded, I think things change. Lastly, we always say engage proactively if you want to build reputation. Don't just do it in crisis. So we work with many of our stakeholders proactively in programs, because when you do those programs, we are not expecting anything in return. You may get some feedback informally. And those informal feedbacks mean a lot, and they give you time to course correct yourself so that you can change the conduct of the business. So I want to end this by saying it starts with personal behavior at the leadership, by setting the tone, by the actions. Clearly, one needs to set out the boundary conditions, which are hard no, which is, those are the zones which you will not tolerate. But then there is a zone of dilemma. There, I think it's a constant review, constant engagement with those sort of issues which one must engage in so that you can come to the right decision. And it's a moving target. It's something which keeps changing from time to time. And lastly, of course, I would say that have stories and rituals to spread the message amongst your team. And really, COVID has shown us that if you do this right, things always happen well. Because during COVID, what we as leaders have learned is that the frontline staff were taking decisions on their own. There was no internal mechanism because they had to take their decisions proactively. And by and large, they were excellent decisions. So the proof in the pudding is when you see the company act, when the area sales manager has taken his own call, when you find that the plant manager has taken his own call. He has not gone through an elaborate approval mechanism. And that's when you know the culture is fine. So I think moments like COVID will come once, many times over, it can come in different forms. But it's when these sort of crisis happens, you know the real metal of whether you've built the right culture or not. And the proof is in the, proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. And we are absolutely delighted how corporate India has risen during this COVID times. And the conduct during this COVID times has shown what kind of a trust it has built with the society. End of the day, ethical conduct builds trust, and trust is the cornerstone of reputation. And with reputation is the only way you can build organizations over a long time. Thank you, Mahindra, for this opportunity. I have said what I needed to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mukundan. I must say, if I may, that you have given us the Tata software or Tata recipe to get the business ethics right. Thank you for your time, and I hope that we have been able to relieve you well in time. Despite of your such a busy schedule, we could squeeze it in, and takeaways have been greatly improved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'd like to,
over to you, Professor Mani.
I'd like to only add, I'd like to only add that Mukundan sir was with us for the BMA HR Conclave also. And it's really a delight to have you back here. And it's a pleasure receiving you again and listening to you and get some pearls of wisdom. Thank you ever so much. Would you have time to take one question, sir?
Sure. I have in fact told the other team they have to wait. Because I was not sure whether this would happen. So, yeah.
All right. So one of the thoughts that is coming up in the minds of many people is when we talk about leadership, and when you rightly said that the leadership has to demonstrate ethics. A moral dilemma many leaders face is when they are told to find their successor and groom him. And I think that's where all ethics goes for a toss in many organizations. Would you care to share some of your experiences and wisdom, sir?
So I will not take the name of a leader in the group who actually, on the day of his retirement, he vacated his office. He said, I won't even stay for a day more. And I think that takes for a great courage. I've also had somebody who said that, I still need to pack up my things. Can I use the room next door to sort of stay on? But what I did find in all the cases, and I'm going to speak from my personal experience, is that at least when I was supposed to be taking over, my predecessor used to pass all the notes, all the decision to me, even though he had a view on it. And so that was a part of a guiding process. So I think this transition process is always a very difficult process when someone has to let go. But in reality, I think if we are inculcated with a view that we are all running a relay race, we have to run our part well, and we have to pass the baton to the next person and hope he succeeds, and hope that our judgment of finding the successor has been right. I think it will work out right. And most important in the organizational leadership level is he the person to whom you can trust the company and sleep well at night? Not in terms of financial performance, but in terms of softer issues. Financial issues you can always fix. You can say cost reduction. You can get somebody to come and reduce the cost program. You can say revenue improvement program. But the point about will the conduct of the person be something which will not sort of derail the organization? I think that is the most critical decision in terms of finding a good successor for long-term organization. So it's a very difficult task. But at the end of the day, we think leadership succession has not to be done by one person. It has to be done by a group, because there will be different perspectives which will come. And secondly, we all have to work hard. When I say we, meaning someone, once you appoint the successor, to guide the successor in a way so that the nuances are visible. Styles will be different. And I think style should not matter. It is what are the decisions taken at those crucial points. I don't know whether I've answered your question. I sort of...
No, very much, sir. Very much. We appreciate your response. And thank you so much for squeezing in the time, as Mahindra Chavan just mentioned. It's indeed an honor to have you here with us. And thank you so much for your time and wisdom once again. Namaste, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We now move on to the next component of this BMA Global Ethics Conclave. As it often happens, a program like this calls for a great deal of planning and a great deal of support and collaboration between several people. And with Mr. Chauhan at the helm of this conclave, you can truly expect a lot of international flavor. I'm delighted to welcome in our midst Professor Ravi Dhingra. Professor Ravi Dhingra is joining us all the way from Connecticut, USA. Of course, we are delighted to tell you that Professor Ravi Dhingra is from Amchi, Mumbai, an alumnus of Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, who went on then to build up his career by doing his further studies at Wharton and then moving on to Connecticut, where he's an adjunct professor at the Sacred Heart University. An eminent marketing consultant, he's been in the United States now for over 2 decades. But what brings him to this forum is a passion for Bombay Management Association, and one of its founders, the second president of Bombay Management Association, was the eminent late Dr. K.S. Basu, who incidentally was also the founding director of Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. A person whom several people in this room will remember for his wonderful contribution to the management domain, be it innovation, be it integrity, be it ethics. Dr. Basu's name was always in the forefront. We are delighted, Professor Dhingra, that you gave us the opportunity to collaborate with you on the BMA Global Ethics Conclave, and we sincerely appreciate the support that the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Foundation has provided to this conclave. May we request you to please take a few minutes to tell us a little more about how ethics was an integral part of Dr. Basu's personality and how it helped him groom so many managers of corporate India today. Over to you, Professor Dhingra.
Thank you, Professor Mani, for your kind words. First, I must say technology is indeed a wonderful thing. It enables us to connect and share while being in the comfort of our own personal spaces. It is -7 degrees in Connecticut. If that makes you feel any better, there is 6 inches of snow on the ground. But thanks to Zoom and BMA, I can already feel the warmth in Mumbai. I've been away too long, but never away. I think it's been almost 5 decades that I've been away from Mumbai, but always in my heart. Well, good evening and namaste. And the trustees of the Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust are delighted to support and partner with this with BMA on this global conclave on ethics. Now, this conclave has special significance for the trust because ethics and excellence in many ways exemplified the way Dr. Basu lived his life and conducted his business. It is also special because, as Professor Mani says, he was one of the co-founders of this august body and its second president, I think, from 1961 to 1965. He was an early pioneer in good board governance and professionalizing management of family-held industrial houses in the 70s and 80s. And those boards and chairmen who worked with him remember well the discipline and ethics he instilled in them. I think the year was late 70s, perhaps 1978 or 79. And I was on a short trip to Bombay. I was posted, I was running the Australia, New Zealand business in those days, and I was on a short trip. I had a lunch date with Dr. Basu at the Taj. He enjoyed very much meeting at the Shamiana restaurant in those days, not sure if it is still around. Now, on this particular day, he arrived a a few minutes late, which was highly unusual because very uncharacteristic, because he was always a stickler for time and always very punctual. And rather than his usual bubbly greeting and loud laughter, he looked quite upset. After we had ordered food, I tried to probe. It just happened. It so happened that he had just come from a board meeting and had learned that some government official was going to be paid a certain large sum of money to resolve some problem with duties that had dragged on for a couple of years. Remember, this was still the days of license Raj before liberalization. He said he immediately offered his resignation if they went through with this, because he didn't want to be any part of this unprincipled action. He called it baimani. So even though a competitor had done the same, in his world, this sort of baimani or any sort of baimani was unacceptable, no matter what your competitors were doing. So the Memorial Trust was formed to honor the memory and legacy of this exceptional man, Dr. Kalyan Sundar Basu, a practicing medical doctor from Lahore in Punjab, who moved to Bombay after partition and rose to become a visionary leader and educator, eminent educator, who inspired and mentored and motivated a whole generation of leaders, senior executives, entrepreneurs, industrialists, not just in India, but indeed around the world. He was an executive director on the board of Hindustan Lever before he became the founding director of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management. He was also one of the co-founders of the Bombay Management Association. And by the 70s, he had become an internationally recognized management educator and practitioner, and traveled extensively to conduct lectures and seminars all around the world. On another occasion, the chairman of one of the companies he was mentoring handed Dr. Basu a bag. Dr. Basu took the bag, opens the bag, and there's a stack of very large bills. He was quite puzzled. And so the chairman said, Dr. Saab, this is your 2 lakh board and consultation fees. And Dr. Basu replied, what will I do with all this cash? How will I account for this? Ye mere se nahi sambhala jayega, and promptly handed the bag back to the chairman. Such was the principle and integrity of the man. The word ethics, as you know, was not part of the common business lexicon in those days, and I personally never heard him use that word. But I often heard him say, "Imandari se kaam karo," do the right thing. There were few, if any, corporate codes of conducts in those days until the late 70s and early 80s, but his message and actions exemplified what we know today as ethics. His favorite phrase actually was, things are rarely black and white. There are always shades of gray, something that Mr. Mukundan also coincidentally referred to. It is how you make decisions in those gray areas that define your character and your company's ethics. It's not just about morals. To me, ethics is not just about morals, but how you make decisions and how you act in those gray situations that define you, define your character, and define your company's character and ethics. It was indeed a privilege to have known Dr. Basu and be one of his many students who learned not just management concepts, but important life lessons from him. My fellow trustees and I'm glad to see Mr. Ernest Fernandez here with us, a fellow trustee. We thank you, Professor Mani. We thank the Bombay Management Association for hosting this event, very important event, and the speakers who are keynoting, the illustrious speakers who keynoted this event today, and all the attendees who took the valuable time to attend this session. Dr. Basu would indeed have been very proud that an organization that he helped found 66 years ago is very much alive and well, not only has a pulse, but is getting better with age and hosting this timely conclave today. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and good evening and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Professor Dhingra. I must confess that there are so many past presidents here attending this conclave, and it is truly the credit to them that they have continued the relay race that Mr. Mukundan had spoken about. And in every lap, the performance was better than the previous lap. And I think that's what makes organizations great. May I hand back over to Mr. Mahendra Chauhan, who has ably conceived, created, until now had the best of speakers for this conclave to take us into the concluding part of this BMA Global Ethics Conclave. Over to you, Mahendra Bhai.
Thank you, Professor Dhingra, and thank you, Professor Mani. I do remember very quickly a small instance, when I met Professor Dr. S.K. Basu, and that was at the BMA library in Army Navy building, And even at that late age, you're very right, he was full of energy, and he would always, take time to spend. I'm young today, I was much younger then. And, I still remember, his great work that he has done. So grateful to him for founding such a great institution. As a past president, I feel very, very honored too. And my personal thanks to SK Basu Foundation for supporting this. Coming to the supporting organization, it's my great privilege to now welcome Professor Judge Mervyn King, who is the patron member of the Mervyn King Academy for Sustainable Development in Asia. Welcome, Mervyn. It's a great moment for us to have you. And we have Judge Sri Krishna, Justice Sri Krishna also with us, and Shailesh Haribhakti, who are also advisory board members for the Mervyn King Academy for Sustainable Development in Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, before I invite the two illustrious former judges of the Supreme Courts of India and South Africa, I would like to invite, we have amongst us Charles Tilley from UK, who is the CEO of International Integrated Reporting Council. Charles, if you're there, can I just invite you to make a brief comment on how IIRC from UK is supporting the ethics and ethical behavior of the different organizations?
Thank you very much indeed for asking me to talk. This has been an absolutely fantastic session. I'm also looking very forward to the concluding session, but I think that it really has been quite excellent, and I've learned a lot today, which is always, I think, the good measure of a conference. But to me, where we as the IRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, can, I hope, add value is in terms of the provision of thinking and tools which support good decision making. And at the heart of that, and I think we've heard a lot about this today, is obviously transparency. It's about behavior, and in that regard, getting the right metrics and linking those to the right incentives is hugely important. And all of that links to having a very good understanding of your business model. But at the heart of all this, it seems to me, and I think the focus of today has been this, is do you really, as a business, do you really understand the environment in which you're operating, how you're creating value for your customers, your employees, the society in which you're operating, your supply chain? And then are you truly looking after all of those key relationships effectively? Are you doing the right thing with those relationships? And I think that is critical to the long-term success of the organization. And so, to me, good behavior, ethical behavior is at the heart of all this. And for me, what I hope that the IRC, through our integrated reporting framework and our integrated thinking, are providing are some tools to help companies in terms of identifying these key issues which support and underpin ethical good behavior. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. And I think it's so interesting to have one of the founding members of IIRC in Marvin King and the CEO of IIRC. I myself privileged to be the council member, and I'm aware what kind of a great framework, which is the globally acceptable framework for the future of corporate reporting. And this will definitely encourage the ethical behaviors in more and more corporates across the globe. Thank you for your brief comments, Charles, and thank you for taking time out to join us. Now with this, we move forward and we have come to the last lab, but very interesting thing, because when we were designing this program, we thought of personal ethics, we thought of business ethics, and we said, look, I think most of our societies have conflicts and differences, and those differences are mostly landing up in courts. And therefore, judicial ethics is another very, very interesting sort of concept that we should discuss about. But before we begin it formally, may I request Mr. Inderpal Singh, another former president of Bombay Management Association, to formally introduce Justice B.N. Srikrishna. And then I'll introduce my own mentor, Marvin King.
Yeah, thank you, MT. It's indeed a pleasure for me to introduce Justice B.N. Srikrishna. I think those living in Mumbai and India, he really needs no introductions. If we were to fill in the kind of the committees that he had chaired over the years and the commissions that he had headed, probably will require more than half an hour to merely list them down. And he's one of the most courageous judges in India. He has a stellar reputation as a judge, and especially as the retired judge of Supreme Court of India. Mr. B.N. Krishna also today leads the committee that came out with the draft of Personal Data Protection Bill, which is much debated in our media and press and amongst various bodies, because it may probably determine how we connect with the cyber world. He's also currently the chairman of Financial Sector Reforms Commission. He's a rare combination of legal insights, knowledge, business understanding, ethics, and the whole maturity that comes, that is required to manage a complex nation and its systems like that of India. So he's eminently qualified to share his views with us, and which I think we should value as much as we can, because these are from practice of actual practice and deep knowledge of our society, how it works. So thank you, MK, for giving this opportunity to me, and over to you.
Thank you, IP, for doing this honor to us. And let me add my word of welcome to Justice Srikrishna. Welcome, sir. Thank you for taking time out. And Marvin King, I must say, is the former judge of Supreme Court of South Africa. He's one of the top 5 authorities in governance and sustainability and sustainable development. And therefore, you know, he's rightly, his legacy is being perpetuated by way of founding the Marvin King Academy for Sustainable Development in Asia. And he's the patron member of that. I had the privilege of having him as my mentor for more than 20 years. He's chaired lots of committees and bodies around the world, but two of them are very, very important. He's chair emeritus of Global Reporting Initiative, which has created the global framework of reporting on sustainability, and International Integrated Reporting Council. He's chairman emeritus again, which is creating the future of corporate reporting in an integrated thinking model and integrated manner. With this, I welcome you, Marvin, and Justice Sri Krishna, both of you. I would be asking a couple of questions and then would encourage both of you legal eagles to engage in a dialogue. So may I begin with you, Marvin, first. Marvin, if I may ask, what do you think is the role of national culture on ethics? Is it true that cultures that are more ethical have better judicial system to deal with immorality in society and unethical practices in business? Your thoughts, please.
Well, culture is a question of perception of character. Culture is something more internal to an organization, but outsiders, it's their perceptions which are important, and their perceptions are formed through the conduct of an organization. Organizations which are incorporated are persons in law in their own right. They have no mind and they have no conscience. The mind and conscience are the people who lead it, the individuals, the directors of a company, for example. And when the company does something wrong, some act which is seen to be not one of a responsible corporate citizen, the wrath of society turns against the company. But as I said in a talk I gave in Australia, the company as an incapacitated person in law is always innocent. The wrath should turn against its corporate leaders because they are the conscience and the deciding mind of the company. So the question of culture in a country is important, but it's the perception of people of what is the culture, what is happening inside a country. One thing I do know, that the independence of a judiciary, and a judiciary that has no noise around it, that is seen to be independent of mind and absolutely intellectual honesty, has crossed that intellectual Rubicon where you actually clear your mind of present needs and past experiences and focus on the issue at hand and apply the law and make a decision which you believe is right, legally speaking. And it is true that an independent, honest judiciary stands out like a beaming light in a country where it has a culture of corruption and immorality. As soon as that creeps into the judiciary, which is the last bastion of decency, then you have a complete collapse of a democratic state. And there are examples of that. So the short answer to your question is that even if you have a culture of corruption or immorality, the judiciary must stand fast and must make decisions which are correct and according to the law.
Thank you, Marvin. Those wise words can come only from a practicing. And by the way, Marvin was the youngest Supreme Court judge of South Africa. He was the right-hand man of Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela used to call him my judge. So thank you, Marvin, for giving us those insights. Let me now move on to Justice Sri Krishna. Justice Sri Krishna, attorneys make ethical decisions every day when deciding how to defend or represent a client. And attorneys working for large firms also must act ethically in their business practices. The Code of Professional Ethics guides an attorney's behavior, but so do the attorney's personal standards. How can one best match these two, one's personal standards and the code of your firm's conduct?
Thank you, Mahendra, for giving me this opportunity of sharing my thoughts with you on this very complex subject.
Welcome, sir.
To start with, I echo what Marvin just now said. See, it's not merely the national culture that really matters in the ultimate analysis. Even with the national culture of, take for example, India. India has had its culture of dharma right from God knows when, from the stage of Vyas Maharshi or Mahabharata and all that. But do we not have corrupt people here? Do we not have corrupt judges in this country? I remember my own Chief Justice of India in one function in publicly when I was Chief Justice in Kerala. The Chief Justice of India made a statement and said, "I know that my judges are all 80% honest. Converse of that is at least 20% of them."
20%.
So that means that even if you have the best orchard, you will have some bad apples. So there are always two situations. One is the DNA with which you are hardwired. You start with it from being whatever you are, as some of the earlier speakers said. At the impressionable stage, what are the sanskar or the impressions that you have in your mind? Is it oriented towards honesty, truth, and integrity, or is it succeeded by at any cost? So this matters a lot. Thereafter, it is the association of people, even during your young adult stage, pre-adult stage, that matters. And that ultimately determines your ultimate character. Now, talking about attorneys, the job of the attorney is to represent the client. You know, a famous American lawyer once said, every attorney has 3 C's. His duty towards his client, his duty towards his duty towards the court first, duty towards the client, and the 3rd C is the duty towards the conscience. That is more important, most important. I would put it in that order of ascending. Therefore, his job is to ensure that the client's interests are represented in any legal matter to the best of his ability without compromising on basic honesty and integrity. So if attorneys can individually practice this, the office of the attorney or the firm of the attorney will automatically have their reputation increased. And it is certainly possible if you are, I look at it this way, if you are honest, you can surely make sure that your rest of the people who deal with you are forced to be honest. Because if they are dishonest, they'll stick out like sore thumbs. So this is true of attorneys and their firms also.
Thank you, Justice Srikrishna. I think this is the crux of the judicial ethics, 3 C's, your responsibility towards your client, court, but first the responsibility of the conscience. Yeah, thank you so much. Over to you, Marvin. I would like to ask you that lawyers can't represent clients when they have a conflict of interest. For example, an attorney could not sue someone he had previously represented if his previous representation gave him information that would lead to an unfair advantage for the appearance of one. What are your comments on this?
Well, a barrister or an attorney cannot act for a borrower and a lender. I mean, obviously, that's a conflict of interest. So where the interests of the parties are opposite, that's when you get conflict in the common law. But in every country, you have statutes dealing with conflict, and usually it deals in corporation law with personal financial interest in a matter. If you have personal financial interest in the matter as a director, for example, you cannot then be a party to making a decision, which is a collective mind decision of all those directors, and you're part of that collegiate. So you just cannot do that. But conflict is a critical issue for the judicial officer. And then it comes to the question of recusal, because sometimes sitting on a bench, one of the last desperate moves of the legal representative is to ask the judge to recuse himself. And I'm sure my brother judge has had this experience. And usually it's spurious things that are put why you should recuse yourself, hoping to take what is known as the Stalingrad defense, where you just string the case out and hopefully a witness will die or something will happen. But you've got to, again, on the question of recusal, you've got to honestly apply your mind and see, is there an actual bias? If not, is the perception of bias from the people, the perception of bias so strong that you should recuse yourself? But you've got to deal with that perception of bias. The perception of bias is actually sometimes worse in the sense of being stronger in the eyes of members of society than actual bias, because actual bias shows up immediately, like being the borrower and being the lender, as I gave an example. But perceptions of bias that when I was a young man, and before I went on the bench, I took out the plaintiff's sister, then I must recuse myself. You've got to think, well, in the eyes of people and the citizens of the country, will they see that as a perception of bias? And what kind of relationship did I have with this lady that I took out that's the sister of the plaintiff in the case, whatever it is? So you've got to weigh these things up very carefully, but perception of bias is a critical issue embedded in the question you've asked.
So thank you, Marvin. I think it's an important point that conflict is a critical issue. And if there is an actual bias, but the perception of bias could be even worse than the actual bias. That's a great takeaway for us. I'm going to, at the end, maybe another question. Then I would encourage each one of you to ask at least one question each to the other brother. Because, that's what I want, a dialogue between two former Supreme Court judges. So let me come to my last question to Justice Sri Krishna, and then I'll leave it to two of you. The practice of law must often deal with specific challenges such as consumption of illegal substances, fiscal optimization, urbanism, and environmental protection, establishing custody of minors, etc. These types of cases give rise to moral dilemmas that should be resolved by the lawyer based on abstract principles like dignity, honor, ethical standards, integrity. What are your comments, sir? In practice, how does it happen?
Mahendra, fortunately, I come from a very traditional family where I was introduced to scriptures at a very young age. One principle that stands out apart from everything else is the Padma Purana says a very interesting thing. It gives a very terse definition of what is right and what is wrong. It says, Atmana pratikulani pareshamna samacharit. So whatever is bad for you, don't let it happen to others. You apply this principle in any situation, the dilemma is over. Whether it is environmental protection or whatever else that you, fiscal optimization or whatever. And Mahatma Gandhi also gave us another thumb rule. He said, whenever you decide an issue, think whether it is going to improve the lot of the man with tears in his eyes. If you can wipe away the tears in his eyes, then you have done the right thing. These two principles have been my guiding principles in life as a lawyer, as a judge, and maybe till the end of my life. So if I'm doing something that is bad, if something is happening which is bad for me, I think it is bad for everybody else. That is the first principle. Never allow anything to happen to somebody which you think is bad for yourself. Apply this test everywhere and the dilemma is over.
That's a great, I think something which I even heard from my father. They say, Atmavat Sarva Bhuteshu. Consider everyone else like you. So whatever is bad for you, don't let it happen to others.
That's correct.
That's another great takeaway. So with this, I think I would like to sort of leave it to two of you. If Marvin, you have anything to sort of ask Justice Sri Krishna and vice versa.
We can compare notes of long careers, but that will take us 3 days.
Sitting And certainly in being part of the British Empire, South Africa, and also India, sitting as a criminal judge, you wear a red robe. Sitting as in the civil courts, you wear a black robe. And what people don't understand is a judge is not there to find the truth or to make a judgment on the truth.
Yeah, right.
A judge deals with probability, and that's what you have to do.
That's right.
And when you come to a conclusion of probability, and heaven forbid that my brother judge and I have given a judgment which was against the truth, but that's not because he and I acted incorrectly. We've got to act on the probabilities, because no judge is actually present witnessing the alleged stabbing to death of a person. No, we've got to weigh up the circumstances. So I'll just give you an example. Sitting with my red robe on in the criminal court, a mother with a fruit plantation farm just outside Johannesburg stored her fruit in a warehouse, but it was being stolen. So she phoned her son, who lived in Durban, and he said, "Look, I'll come up and I'll sleep in the warehouse, in the barn with you, and we'll see if someone comes into the barn." And they put mattresses down on the floor, and it did happen. In the middle of the night, someone climbed through the window, and he was standing over the mother with a knife in his hand. He sprung up off the mattress, started chasing the man. He started fleeing for the window to climb out of the window again. He wrestled with the man, took the knife, and as the man was fleeing, stabbed him in the back. The man climbed out of the window, and about 300 yards from the window, he fell down dead because he'd stabbed him and got near an artery, and he bled to death. He called the police, he was arrested, and he was charged with murder. Counsel for the state argued he was guilty of murder, not premeditated, but dolus eventualis. It was second degree. It was reckless, and recklessness is equivalent to premeditation in law.
Yes.
So it was guilty of murder. Counsel for the accused said, "No, my lord, it was a spontaneous thing. It's culpable homicide, or manslaughter, as it's called in some jurisdictions." Anyway, I made a decision in law that he was guilty of murder. It was reckless. He saw the man was fleeing. He could have let him go, but he stabbed him in the back. I found him guilty of murder. So counsel for the state said, "Well, guilty of murder, he must go to jail, and he must for several years." And he recommended I should sentence him to jail because of the special circumstances. He said to jail for at least 7 years. Counsel for the accused said, "Well, my lord, he's got no previous conviction. He was there to protect his mother." I said, "Well, I have found him guilty of murder, and I agree with counsel for the state that there should be a term of imprisonment. You are sentenced to imprisonment until the rising of this court. Court will adjourn." And I got up and walked out of court.
That was interesting.
And that was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. But the most interesting part of the story, I got a letter from his mother. "Dear Judge, I prayed to God that I would find a judge who was a man with kindness and understanding."
Absolutely.
And that was one of the proudest moments of my life.
My salutes to you, Mohammed. That's a great anecdote.
Yes.
Justice Sri Krishna.
Since it is about ethics and all that, I'll just give a short. Unfortunately, I also have to go at 7 o'clock. Doesn't matter. Another 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I was sitting on a bench in the Bombay High Court. I was still in the Bombay High Court at that time. I was a junior judge, there was a senior judge, and a very important, very contentious matter was being heard by us. It was to come up for admission on a Monday. And on Saturday, the list gets published. On Monday morning, I get a call from the senior judge saying that something important has happened. Will you come to the chamber half an hour earlier? I want to discuss something with you. So I go to him, and he was virtually shaking in his pants. He said, "Over the weekend, some people contacted me and they have offered so much of money for deciding this case in particular manner." So he said, "Boy, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. They're going to call me up about 10 minutes in another. What answer should I give them?" without batting an eyelid, I told him that you are from the Mofussil area. You don't know the corruption rates in Bombay. I'm a Bombay bred man. I know the going rates. You tell them to come and meet me. I will discuss with them and fix the fees. If they fix the bribe. He said, can I say such thing? I said, tell them without hesitation and let me see who comes to me. Alas, the sad part of the story is nobody came to me. I lost a good lot of money. But my reputation remained intact. I was told the figure in those days, I'm talking of the 90s, some couple of crores of rupees were being offered for doctoring the case. I didn't get the money, but my conscience remained with me. I'm happy.
No, so they didn't come to you because they knew your reputation.
I don't know.
You know?
No,
So,
incidentally, it happened that the matter came up before us. It was heard for about 8 days. Some of the eminent counsel in the country argued. And on the merits of the case, I did hold against that man and said, sorry, it's everything against you. Man went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court fully agreed with me and said his judgment is right. So these are some of the things that impress you along the career path.
and both of these stories, have brought tears in my eyes because Christophe in the beginning, talked about the tears, the emotions, which are important. And I think we need more such judges. Like everything else should come to an end. Every good thing should come to an end. Even this conclave has to come to an end. I can't thank enough to all the speakers, all the participants, and lastly, you two mentors of mine. May I request Professor Mani to formally propose a vote of thanks, but it is my personal duty to convey my thanks to S.K. Basu Foundation and Professor Dhingra and Ernest Fernandez, the Mervyn King Academy for Sustainable Development in Asia, and others who supported this, all the speakers. And by the way, Mervyn, you came a little late. I must share with you, I felt very proud that this convention turned out to be truly international. We have people from 14 countries and 4 continents. So that's what bespeaks of the success of this. I feel proud, I feel humbled. Over to you, Professor Mani.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahendra Chavan. And let me continue where you started, rightly so. Distinguished speakers from across the globe, participants from all over the world. We had 256 people visiting us today during this digital webinar at different given points in time. All of them, I'm sure, benefited by the wonderful wisdom that many of our distinguished speakers shared with us. I'll be failing in my duty if I do not first acknowledge you, Sri Mahendra Chavanji, for conceiving this whole BMA Global Ethics Conclave with so much of precision, so much of passion, and that was visible in every speaker who came along. Thank you very much, Sailesh Bhai. You've always been with us to mentor all our activities, and having you today in the Ethics Conclave was yet another wonderful experience for us too. I'm just able to recall the ESG Conclave, which you had led about 3 months ago, where there too we had participants from all over. And I'm so delighted and extremely obliged to all the past presidents who have been always there with us to bless us, guide us, motivate us. Right from Mahendra Chavanji and Sailesh Haribhakti ji for this program, Indrapal ji, Mr. Ernest Fernandez. We also had with us Sri Ashok Sharma, Sri Ramakrishnan at different given points of time in this webinar. Thank you, every one of the past presidents, for continuing to encourage us. My committee members were working so hard behind the scenes, ensuring that we have good speakers and good participation. I'll be failing in my duty if I don't acknowledge the woman power of BMA Secretariat. We have a secretariat where, incidentally, it's a very powerful woman power. Supriya, Lakshmi, Andrula, Deepa, thank you so much for all the hard work that you do. You always remain behind the scenes, but you are the backbone of all the good work that we've been able to do right from April till date. Despite the lockdown, I think digital BMA is something that we've been able to bring across to all our members. Last but not the least, let me thank every one of you participants who came here this evening and made this whole conclave so very satisfying for us. Professor Ravi Dhingra, the relationship that BMA and Dr. K.S. Basu Memorial Trust has begun has happened only because of your initiative and your enthusiasm. And we are indeed obliged to you for trusting BMA as a valuable partner. And I assure you that this relationship shall go on and stand the test of time. On that note, may I request everybody to get ready for what we call our Keep Smiling moment. Can we have your videos on so that we can have a group photograph? This digital group photograph will serve as a memory of this wonderful learning experience we had today evening. We have all of 6 screens to cover. So may I request everybody to be showing a little bit of digital patience, put on your best smiles, and let's capture this moment of joy of the wonderful learning session that we had this evening. Everybody, quickly, please, so that we maintain our good reputation of not only starting on time, but also concluding on time. A special mention to each one of the speakers who remembered that there is a clockwork precision initiated by Mr. Chavan. I had an invisible alarm with me, but they never gave me a chance to use it. So a special thanks to you for being so very, very punctual. Cameras on, please. Secretariat team, please get ready.
Thank you.
And may I also inform you that in this entire series of Learn from Leaders, where today the Ethics Conclave had so many leaders, the concluding part of this series as part of our National Management Day celebrations is tomorrow, where we are going to have reflections on leadership by Mr. Ajay Piramal. This is again facilitated with the support of the K.S. Basu Memorial Trust, where Mr. Piramal is going to talk to us tomorrow evening on his reflections on leadership. Please join us to continue to learn from this digital platform that we have conceived for you. Tomorrow's session is 5:30 to 7 p.m. If you have not yet registered, please do so that the team can send you the attendance Zoom links appropriately. Thank you once again, everybody. Mr. Mahendra Chavan, ever grateful to you for this wonderful effort that you put in to your own passionate methods, and of course, for your own passionate organization, the Bombay Management Association. Good evening, everybody. Stay safe, stay blessed.
Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, Justice Sri Krishna. Thank you, Indipalji. Thank you, Ernest. And thanks, Mani. Congratulations, one more feather in your cap.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening.